President Muhammadu Buhari has challenged youths in Africa to lead and win the fight against corruption in order to reverse the negative trend. The president was speaking to African youths and leaders at the opening of two-day Africa Youth Congress Against Corruption in Abuja. He also charged the youth to develop anti-corruption curricula for campaigns in schools, businesses, and the public space. Our State House correspondent, Ibrahim Adra, reports.
The African Union in Ethiopia chose President Buhari to lead Africa in the fight against corruption on the continent in 2018. While accepting the responsibility, he promised to work with the youths toward ridding Africa of corruption. Here in Abuja, youths from across Africa sit down to take stock, share lessons and strategize on ways of tackling the menace. They share their stories in a panel discussion. Various speakers, including Nigeria's Minister of Justice, harp on the ills and impact of corruption, drawing a nexus between corruption and injustice.
It is indeed an injustice to the state, injustice to the youth, injustice to the children, injustice to the women, injustice to the aged, injustice to the Africa and Africans.
This Congress is a grand finale of President Buhari's campaign against graft in Africa in 2018. He restates his confidence in the ability of the youth to push the fight even further.
The young people of Africa, this fight against corruption is yours to lead and to win. In order to reverse the negative trends of corruption and its implications for Africa. African youth must remain the front and center of restoring traditional African values of probity, integrity, honesty, diligence, and hard work. It is only when the youth drives this change that corruption will be eliminated.
The young people are happy with the opportunity to join the fight, but warn of limiting challenges.
I think there's something that is lacking, which is the collaboration between young people and officials.
On one level, they still do not control the resources of the continent. The resources are still in the hands of the politicians, largely. And so that is a big challenge.
The AU President, Paul Kagame, and the African Union Commission Chairman, Musa Mahama, were represented at the event, which also had in attendance the acting chairman of the EFCC, Ibrahim Magu, and heads of other anti-graft agencies. The organizers are taking advantage of this event to talk about youth and conduct of peaceful election in Africa. They're incorporating a walk against corruption and how to use music in the fight against corruption. At the end of it all, there is expected to be a Pan-African Youth Declaration on the fight against corruption. From the Confront Center in the State House, Abuja, Ibrahim Adra, reporting for Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the Nigerian Bar Association, the NBA, has warned that the fight against corruption must not be selective or discriminatory in nature. Nigeria's umbrella body of legal practitioners made this call on the occasion of the International Anti-Corruption Day. In a statement, the NBA president, Paul Osoro, commended President Muhammadu Buhari for consistently making it the credit of his government to fight corruption since inauguration almost 4 years ago. While warning that the anti-corruption world must not even be perceived to be selective, the NBA adds that the trial of persons for corrupt practices must also not be tainted with corruption. The NBA therefore demanded that trials of persons for corrupt practices must be speedy and not used as a basis for trampling upon the fundamental rights of citizens. In the meantime, the NBA president, Mr. Paul Osoro, insists he is innocent of the charges brought against him by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for alleged laundering of 1.4 billion naira. Mr. Osoro, who spoke to journalists at the National Executive Committee meeting of the association in Abuja, however, says he will appear in court. The NBA president reiterated his calls for a legislation that will prohibit media trial of persons already in court.
I believe that if there are issues, assuming that there was something that was done, except the association itself makes a complaint to the EFCC or any of the other criminal investigating agencies, then they don't have any interest, they don't have any basis having to come into what we are doing. We are an association of lawyers. We have a way of regulating ourselves. I haven't been served. I expect I would be served. But the facts as I know it, I am completely innocent. And the facts as I know it, I presented it in the address that was adopted by NEC.
Let's talk more about this now. Joining me on the News at 10 is civil rights activist Lanre Suraj. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you.
I appreciate your being here on a Sunday. So the president has thrown the buck back to the youth, apparently, saying that they must lead and win the fight against corruption. Do you think that's right, considering this is a president who campaigned on anti-corruption, saying that this will be the fulcrum of his government when he becomes president?
Yeah, I think it is right, and it is not just now, after 3 years, that we will be calling on the youth to do it. Just like you rightly said, one of the key 3 cardinal points of the campaign of the government was actually anti-corruption and the fight against corruption. What we've seen majorly and largely, it's the effort of the government at recovering some of the monies that were stolen. Still yet to be fully asserted in the government is the prevention of corruption from happening. I will give you a very lucid example of that. The need to actually constitute the board of the National Council on Public Procurement, which is actually meant to prevent the corruption that is associated with procurement. And procurement presently constitutes about 70% of the cases of corruption in Nigeria. For more than 3 years of the government, we're yet to have that council constituted by the government. It is right to actually charge everybody to be part of the fight against corruption. It is not actually possible for a government to fully and effectively fight corruption.
Well, we heard one of the attendees at the parliament that the president attended, where he was making this statement, and one of them said many of the continent's resources lie in the hands of these politicians, these government officials. So how are they supposed to help in the fight against corruption? Are there practical examples?
Yeah, actually, this is where the responsibility is that of the citizens and not just the youth. We know we should actually be able to investigate, and that is the challenge. What are the total emolument of an average public office holder? So we, the citizens, must be able to say, no, within what is known as the emolument of a public office holder, you are living beyond your means. And their wealth are not only used within our means, are displaced. You know, there's the craze now within both the public office holder and the political and the social elite in Nigeria. The weddings of their children are not conducted only in Nigeria. There's a phase in Nigeria, there's another phase in Dubai. And that is the craze and the trend going on now.
But that's a personal choice.
No, it's not a personal thing. So it's about, that's why I said, both for the public office. So it is important to check if someone who is in office as a public office holder is earning a particular amount of salary, is now engaged in this social life that is being celebrated by our social and cultural and even now religious institutions, are checked by the citizens to ensure that we make it difficult for those monies that we're saying are in the hands of the politician, for them to opulently spend it within the society.
That opens up a whole other discussion when you want to talk about what public officers, and most times they don't even want to say, even when you demand that.
Which is why we must demand it.
Well, demanding is one thing, yes. Then saying it is another. But the NBA has also spoken about what it calls selective war on so-called corrupt individuals, and they're saying that the war against corruption should not be selective, it should not be discriminatory. Do you think this is a major concern, seeing that many people before them have also raised the same concern?
No, I think it's actually both a challenge for the NBA itself, because that is where you have lawyers who are involved both in prosecution and in defense. So the NBA as a body must actually also lead that fight. The major thing that is crucial is that we don't want a situation where innocent people are falsely alleged. But when you talk about selection of who, are you saying selecting between people who are found to actually allegedly be corrupt? So it's not going to be a selection of, but we're talking about not getting innocent people, you know, accused or prosecuted or their rights violated. But selecting between the corrupt people, I don't think that is the kind of argument to be made at this point.
Well, there have been some high-profile cases. I mean, some of them, many of them are still in court. Nobody has been convicted of corruption yet. I mean, these cases are still ongoing. Does that suggest that, you know, the government is winning the fight against corruption?
We just launched what we call 100 high-profile corruption cases to mark the Anti-Corruption Day today. And some of these cases actually started as far back as 2001, 2005. And it is actually in Nigeria that you have many of these corruption cases going that far. And that is why I said the challenge goes to the NBA. Those who are usually responsible are the lawyers who goes to court to plead all manners of delay, which is now the trend, to delay prosecution such that the prosecution would not be concluded in time. So for every flimsy reasons, they would go to Supreme Court and come back. So that is why you see that quite a number of the high political office holders are involved and the cases are protracted.
Well, we can talk from today till tomorrow. The most important thing is a change of orientation for everyone.
Very crucial.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Larry Siraj, for joining us on the news at 10. In the meantime, Nigerian politicians need to go to the people and explain why they should be voted for instead of visiting traditional and religious leaders seeking endorsements. That's the view of the Secretary of the National Peace Committee and Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese, Dr. Matthew Kuka. He told Channels Television's Ladi Akeredoluale on our political program, Roadmap 2019, that does not mean religious leaders should abdicate their responsibilities as society's moral compass.
We are non-state actors. We are non-state actors. But you have politicians who are not prepared to do the hard work. And they visit the house of every traditional ruler seeking endorsement and seeking blame, instead of going out to the people to canvass for votes. But the rational part of our brain has switched off. So for me, it's not a question of what role religion should play. Our responsibility, we are first primarily citizens. And I consider myself a public intellectual. I therefore know the limits of my participation and engagement in the politics of Nigeria. But as to the social question and to what drives governance, we must have that conversation. I think every religious leader must have a certain level of consistency in what our strong points are and what our convictions are. Because we need and we have a responsibility of offering the world a moral compass. Not because we are better, because we have to have a way of seeing things differently, because you cannot live in a country like Nigeria with so much resources and then you think that you can go to bed and sleep peacefully with this creeping inequalities. I mean,